The sun, a malevolent eye in the brassy sky of the American West, beat down with pitiless intensity. Clara Bennett cradled her 8-year-old son Elliot, his small body shuddering with each ragged gasp against the baked earth of the roadside. Just hours before, the ornate iron gates of the Whitmore estate had slammed shut behind them. A final brutal punctuation to Beatrice Whitmore's venomous declaration, "You are nothing, Clara. A grasping whore. Charles may have been foolish enough to marry you, but his true family will see you erased." The memory of the guards and their faces impassive as they'd torn Elliot from her grasp, throwing him against the dusty driveway, like a sack of unwanted grain, sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. She'd fought a she-wolf protecting her cub, only to be met with a backhanded slap that sent her sprawling, the taste of blood and grit instantly coating her tongue. Now that metallic tang mingled with the arid despair. They were refuse brutally discarded their possessions as tattered as their dignity. Heat hazes danced above the shimmering asphalt cars, blurring past each a phantom of indifference. Elliot whimpered a sound so faint it was nearly swallowed by the screaming cicadas. "Water." He rasped, his lips cracked and alarmingly blue. The nearly empty bottle offered little solace. Clara blinked, trying to clear the shimmering distortions before her eyes. Was that a buzzard circling, or just a figment of her sun-addled brain? He can't die here. She thought a primal scream trapped in her throat. Not after everything. Not my Elliot. Death felt like a patient circling vulture. Then a mirage solidified, a dusty silver-gray Ford F-150 pickup, slowing its approach, a hesitant punctuation in the vast, suffocating silence. A stranger's voice, raspy from the heat, cut through her delirium. "Some people die in the shade, ma'am. Others survive as if they're burning alive under the sun. Which one are you gonna be?" Along this deserted stretch of federal highway, where no oasis of civilization broke the monotony of scorched earth hope, was a cruel mirage. Temperatures clawed past 105, the road itself seeming to bleed tar. Clara's cotton dress torn where a guard had grabbed her, stained with dirt, and her own blood clung to her peeling sunburned skin. A throbbing gash on her forehead oozed, matting her dark hair. Elliot lay limp, his small arms swollen, crisscrossed with angry red welts and dried blood, their tattered cloth bag holding only a few pitiful belongings, and the almost empty water bottle was a testament to their futile flight from the opulent Whitmore estate, now a distant, malevolent fortress. "Elliot." Clara whispered, her voice a shard of glass. "Wake up, baby. Please. Don't leave Mommy." His lips remained still. Yet his small hand, fragile as a bird's wing, clutched the hem of her dress, a tiny, tenacious anchor. Miles away, behind the tinted soundproof glass of the Whitmore estate's first-floor parlor, Beatrice Whitmore, matriarch by marriage, and Charles Whitmore's formidable, implacable mother, watched the estate gates seal. Immaculate, in pristine white, a glass of iced tea sweating in her perfectly manicured hand, her expression was as glacial as the cubes clinking within. "She doesn't belong here anymore," rumbled Percy Langston, Charles's closest associate, the family's Machiavellian financial advisor, and unbeknownst to most, Beatrice's confidant in more than just business. His eyes glinted with a predator's satisfaction. A regrettable but necessary pruning of the family tree. Clara didn't look back. The mansion, the accusations, the life stolen, ash and dust. Only Elliot mattered. As despair threatened to swallow her whole, the pickup crunched to a halt. The man who emerged. Silas Whitmore, 41, was an enigma. A reclusive millionaire landowner, estranged cousin to Charles, a man long haunted by his own inferno. He was broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and sorrow, his eyes the color of a storm-racked sky. The sight of the mother and child, a scene too reminiscent of his own irretrievable loss, pierced through his self-imposed isolation. He saw not strangers, but a brutal mirror of past agony. "The boy's burning up," Silas said, his voice calm, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. He offered water from a battered canteen and a ride not out of abstract pity, but from a deep, unhealed place of shared pain. Clara, a wounded wolf, wary of any hand, finally nodded, not in trust, but in desperate, utter surrender. The truck's interior smelled of old leather antiseptic, and something indefinable that whispered of sanctuary. Elliot lay on the back seat, Clara sponging his brow with a cloth. Silas provided her movements, frantic yet tender. In the rearview mirror, Silas saw more than a mother and child. He saw ghosts, his Emily, his little Annie. "Town clinics are closed for the day," he said quietly, his gaze flicking to the boy. "But I know a retired Army medic, Doc Avery. He's crusty but the best. He'll come." A flicker of something was. Gratitude softened Clara's exhausted, haunted eyes. They arrived at a remote ranch, weathered white wooden fences snaking across rolling pastures, a proud 3-story brick house, a century old, but immaculately kept. Sunrise Ranch. It was a place where silence had settled heavy as a shroud after Silas lost his wife, Emily, and daughter Annie in a horrific house fire 6 years prior. He'd nearly mentioned the local legend when he first saw Clara by the roadside. The legend of the Whispering Caves, a network of caverns on his property fabled to offer shelter to those in direst need. He'd dismissed it as fanciful folklore then, but the instinctive pull to bring them here to this very ranch had been undeniable. Clara awoke later disoriented still in the truck. Darkness had fallen. "Elliot," she gasped, panic clawing at her. "In the guest room. Safe." Silas's voice came from the direction of the kitchen, a low rumble in the quiet. She stumbled out, her legs weak. Elliot was sleeping peacefully, small cuts bandaged a cool cloth on his forehead. A glass of water and a handwritten note. "Rest. Don't worry. He's stable." Clara slid to the floor beside the bed, and the tension uncoiling from her spine in a series of gut-wrenching sobs she'd suppressed for what felt like an eternity. Silas, watching from the kitchen doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light, saw not just relief, but a fierce, unwavering devotion. He didn't know her story yet. A dissonant chord resonated deep within him, a disquieting premonition that their paths were irrevocably, perhaps perilously, intertwined. Night brought deeper worry. Elliot's fever, though lessened, persisted. Clara, restless, found herself in the main living area. On the mantelpiece, a polished silver frame held a photo of a smiling woman with kind eyes and a little girl clutching a faded teddy bear, and the very same bear now resting on a nearby rocking chair. "Your wife and daughter?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely a whisper. Would they mind us being here?" Silas's voice was low, rough, with unshed grief. "They passed. House fire. 6 years ago. Burn smoke inhalation. They didn't make it." He recounted the horror, the acrid smell of smoke, the terrifying orange glow, Emily's desperate smoke-choked plea from the ambulance gurney, her voice raspy. "Find a good woman, Silas. Don't be alone. Let her take care of you." Then the sterile finality of the hospital, the pronouncements of death. Clara's empathy, born of her own fresh agony, was a silent, potent solace. Doc Avery arrived, a grizzled man with gentle hands and eyes that had seen too much. His presence was immediately reassuring. "He'll be fine thanks to you both," he told Clara after examining Elliot. Then he cornered Silas in the hallway. "Silas, I ain't just talking about the boy. Thought I was coming out for a mare in difficult labor, not a woman and child on the brink. I saw you die 6 years ago right alongside Emily and Annie. Tonight, Hell, son, tonight I think I see you breathing again. Silas gripped the worn fabric of his denim coat. I don't know what to do with this, Doc. This feeling. I wasn't looking for it. I don't want it. She ain't a replacement, son. Avery set his hand firm on Silas's shoulder. Lord knows Emily wouldn't want that. She's a chance, a different path. Don't let the past bury you twice. For the first time in 6 long years, the silence in Silas's house didn't feel quite so much like a tomb. Sunlight, a hesitant guest, filtered through the kitchen window. Clara, her limbs aching, but her spirit a fraction lighter, found Silas already there. Coffee's ready, eggs and bacon in the oven. An unspoken truce, a fragile peace settled between them. Midday brought Mildred McLean, the sheriff's wife, a sturdy, kind-eyed woman in her late 50s, a former nurse whose pragmatic compassion was legendary in the county. She arrived with a basket of still warm blueberry scones and a gentle, knowing presence. "You heard through the grapevine we have some new folks out at Sunrise Ranch." She said, her smile encompassing both Clara and Silas as she poured tea. "Known Silas since he was a freckle-faced boy stealing my apples. After Emily and Annie. Well, he didn't let a soul through that gate for more than a year. Not really in, anyway. You're different, Clara. You're here. And you stayed. Not out of pity, I reckon. It's a sign, dear. A flicker in his long darkness." Clara whispered, her gaze drifting to Elliot, who was now attempting to coax Silas's stoic cattle dog into a game of fetch. "I'm just trying to survive, Mrs. McLean. For him. Sometimes." Mildred smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Survivors are the ones best equipped to show others the way back to the light." Weeks blurred into a new tentative rhythm. Shared meals, the clatter of silverware, a counterpoint to Elliot's slowly returning tentative laughter. Silas, surprisingly patient, showed Elliot how to whittle a piece of wood. He even unearthed Annie's small, beautifully tooled saddle from the attic. She wanted to be a cowgirl just like her daddy. He said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Haven't said that out loud to anyone in 6 years. Clara's quiet, empathetic understanding was a balm to his long-festering wounds. He began to speak of Emily and Annie, not with the raw despair of before, but with a rediscovered tenderness, sharing anecdotes, small memories that painted them vibrant and alive. The house, once a mausoleum of grief, slowly began to reawaken its silent rooms, echoing with new, albeit hesitant life. One afternoon, Elliot, with a child's devastating innocence and directness, looked up from his coloring book. "Mr. Silas," he asked, crayon poised, "could you be my dad, my other dad? He made Mom cry a lot." Clara flushed crimson. "Elliot, honey, that's not—" Silas met Elliot's earnest gaze, a complex emotion flickering in his own. He then ruffled the boy's hair. "Go finish that picture of the stallion's son. Later, Dad will help you draw a horse with a flowing mane, just like Spirit." The casual, unthinking dad made Elliot beam with an uncontainable joy. Clara's eyes welled with unshed tears. Silas turned to her, his voice gentle. "It's okay, Clara. More than okay. I'm glad he sees that possibility in me." Then his expression grew more serious. "You never told me, Clara. What really happened that day? Why were you out there?" Clara's story, dammed up for so long, tumbled out in a torrent of pain and betrayal. A loveless, calculated marriage to Charles Whitmore. A cruel, manipulative man, whose affection was a currency he doled out and withdrew with chilling precision. His escalating financial and emotional abuse isolating her, making her doubt her own sanity. The fatal car crash. Charles, roaring drunk, arguing heatedly with his latest mistress on the phone, swerving into oncoming traffic. The Whitmore family, led by the imperious Beatrice, Charles's ruthlessly protective mother, and slavishly supported by Percy Langston, had immediately publicly blamed Clara, painting her as a spendthrift, a gold digger somehow responsible for Charles's recklessness. Beatrice, a woman consumed by a perverse pride and a twisted sense of dynastic honor, had orchestrated Clara's public vilification and their brutal, humiliating eviction. "They dragged me out by my hair," she choked out, reliving the horror, shoved Elliot against the wall. "He hit his head. I just grabbed him and ran. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice broke. Then you came. I didn't just see a woman by the road." Silas admitted, his voice raspy with an answering depth of feeling. "I saw myself in the days after the fire. Helpless, broken, gasping for air. You reminded me that even in the deepest ashes, someone can survive." He then confessed his own festering burden, a guilt he'd carried for years, Charles, in a rare moment of drunken maudlin remorse years ago, before the fire had vaguely confessed to Silas about some shady land dealings, including defrauding Silas himself of a significant parcel of prime hayfields adjacent to Sunrise Ranch. Silas, drowning in his own grief after losing Emily and Annie, and seeing Charles as a pitiable, self-destructive wreck, had done nothing too broken to care about land or money. The guilt had festered another layer of darkness in his already shadowed soul. He used my grief, Clara, my utter distraction, to steal from me. And I let him. This shared vulnerability, this raw, painful truth, forged an unbreakable bond between them, a bond tempered in shared fire. Beatrice Whitmore, however, was not one to concede defeat gracefully. Her whispers, amplified by Percy's oily insinuations, slithered through the small town of Redemption Gulch. Clara Bennett's a scheming seductress, a black widow preying on poor, grieving Silas Whitmore. Mark my words, she's after his fortune now. Percy Langston, dapper and perpetually dangerous, added fuel to the fire with more calculated precision. She's clearly playing him, manipulating his grief. It's a classic setup, mark my words. The woman has no shame. The town, initially indifferent or vaguely sympathetic, began to grow cold, its collective gaze suspicious. Store clerks suddenly became too busy to serve Clara. A crudely painted sign appeared nailed to a fence post on the road leading to town. "Protect our decent men from scheming women." Elliot's innocent, bewildered questions. "Did you do something wrong, Mom? Why are those ladies looking at you like that?" were like needles piercing Clara's already bruised heart. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Clara and Elliot were gathering fallen apples near the old disused well on Silas's sprawling property, its stone wellhead covered in moss, a sleek black sedan, incongruously luxurious against the rustic backdrop, sped up the long gravel driveway. Two burly men, faces grim and impassive, jumped out before the car had fully stopped. "Mrs. Bennett." One of them growled, his voice flat and menacing. "Mr. Langston sends his regards. He and Mrs. Whitmore believe the boy Elliot would be far better off with his rightful grandmother." Fear, cold and sharp as an icicle, pierced through Clara. She shoved Elliot roughly behind her. "Get away from him. You're not taking him anywhere." One man lunged, his ham-like hands reaching for Elliot. Clara, fueled by a primal lioness-like fury, grabbed a heavy fallen branch, swinging it wildly, connecting with his arm. "Leave us alone," she screamed. Just as the man grunted in pain and reached again for Elliot, a deafening crack echoed from the ranch house porch. Not a gunshot aimed to harm, but the unmistakable report of Silas's heavy-caliber hunting rifle fired into the air. The men froze, their eyes wide. "This is private property." Silas's voice lethal and calm, as a frozen river cut through the sudden ringing silence. He stood on the porch, rifle resting easily in his hands, his gaze like chips of ice. "And that woman and that child are under my protection. You have 10 seconds to leave. Now." The men, unnerved by Silas's steely gaze, the unwavering rifle, and the unexpected resistance, scrambled back into their car tires, spitting gravel as they fled. Elliot clung to Clara, sobbing uncontrollably. Silas rushed to them, his face a mask of barely contained fury and deep concern. "Are you hurt? Are you all right?" he asked, his hands surprisingly gentle as he checked them both over. That night, the unspoken truth hung heavy and suffocating in the air of Sunrise Ranch. The Whitmores would stop at nothing. This blatant act of intimidation, however, had an unintended consequence. Finn Morgan, a tenacious, sharp-witted young journalist from Chicago, initially in the area investigating rural water rights disputes, caught wind of the roadside rescue and the subsequent whispers of a powerful family trying to silence a young widow. He was cynical by trade, but possessed an unyielding, almost romantic belief in the power of truth. He found Clara at the small-town diner a neutral ground. "Rumors are cheap currency, Mrs. Bennett," he told her, his gaze direct and appraising over a cup of bitter coffee. "Facts are gold. Tell me yours, the real ones." Clara, sensing a genuine, if somewhat abrasive ally, did. Finn began to dig, his journalistic instincts honed. He unearthed Charles Whitmore's history of reckless spending and Percy Langston's pattern of predatory financial dealings. With Clara's hesitant permission and Silas's grim nod, he focused on the land fraud, discovering forged signatures and backdated documents that proved Percy and Charles had systematically conspired to defraud Silas with Beatrice Whitmore. Not just complicit, but an active, albeit shielded, participant. Then Finn stumbled upon something far more sinister, a piece of the puzzle that reeked of premeditated malice, evidence suggesting Beatrice had been pressuring Charles for months to write Clara entirely out of his will. More chillingly, Finn found a pharmacist who recalled filling an unusual prescription for Beatrice for potent sedatives shortly before Charles's death. And then a partially drafted, unsigned suicide note implicating Clara, which had been found near Charles's desk by Beatrice herself after the crash. A plan presumably thwarted only by the swift arrival of paramedics and the coroner's clear verdict of accidental death. His investigation led him to Maria Sanchez, a former long-serving housekeeper for the Whitmores, now elderly, and living in a small, time-worn cottage on the outskirts of town. Initially terrified, trembling at the mere mention of the Whitmore name, she eventually agreed to speak to Finn, her conscience warring with her fear. "Mr. Charles?" she'd whispered, her wrinkled hands twisting a worn rosary. "He wasn't always a bad man. Before her influence." Finn pressed. "Mrs. Beatrice," Maria clarified, her voice barely audible. She twisted him, made him hard. And Mr. Percy, he was always there, whispering in her ear, pulling the strings like a puppet master. After Mr. Charles died, Mrs. Beatrice, she came into his study like a storm. She told me to burn papers, personal letters. She tried to get into his private safe. Later, Mr. Percy, he came to me. He threatened me. Said I'd lose my small pension, my cottage, everything, if I ever spoke of what I saw. Especially about the terrible arguments between Mr. Charles and Mrs. Beatrice in the weeks before he died, or about her frantic search for his personal papers right after the crash. Maria also tearfully recounted seeing Beatrice coaching Vivian Whitmore, Charles's frail and easily confused mother, on what to say if anyone asked about Clara. As Finn dug, a new ally emerged. Sarah Jenkins, a childhood friend of Clara's from before her disastrous marriage, now a quietly competent paralegal in a neighboring county, heard whispers of Clara's plight through a mutual acquaintance. Horrified, she drove straight to Sunrise Ranch. "Clara, my God, what have they done to you?" Sarah embraced her, aghast at the change in her friend, but resolute. "Beatrice always hated that Charles chose you over her own ambitions for him," Sarah said cryptically before promising to help gather character witnesses who knew Clara before the Whitmore shadow fell over her. Sarah's arrival was a lifeline, a tangible link to a past where Clara wasn't defined by the Whitmore's malice. The simmering tension around Redemption Gulch neared boiling point. One moonless night, a crackling sound, and the acrid smell of smoke woke Silas. A section of his oldest, driest hay barn was ablaze. He and Clara, with frantic help from a few nearby ranch hands, alerted by the glow, fought the flames, managing to save the main structure and the terrified horses within. It was clearly arson. Sheriff Amos McLean, spurred by the escalating violence, Finn Morgan's documented evidence of financial fraud, and Beatrice's suspicious activities, now this brazen attack on Silas's property, finally began a full, albeit initially discreet investigation. Mildred's quiet but firm. Justice doesn't listen to rumors, Amos, and it certainly doesn't cower before wealth or influence, had also significantly swayed him. Clara no longer a cowering victim, but a woman discovering an inner core of steel returned to Sheriff McLean's office. This time she wasn't a supplicant. She was a fighter. Armed with Finn's meticulously compiled dossier, Sarah's contacts, and now disturbingly clear recordings she'd managed to make of Beatrice's increasingly unhinged, threatening phone calls, alongside damning testimonies from other local business people Percy Langston had bullied or defrauded, over the years she laid her case bare. I won't let them rewrite my story or destroy my son's future, she declared, her voice ringing with a newfound conviction. The official-looking envelope arrived like a death knell petition for custody of Elliot Charles Bennett. Plaintiff Vivian Whitmore. Charles's elderly, easily manipulated mother transparently fronting for Beatrice. Grounds for petition: Clara Bennett, unfit mother, unstable. Cohabiting, illicitly endangering child's moral welfare. Clara's resolve hardened into granite. I've been running or trying to all my life, she whispered that night, holding a sleeping Elliot close, the scent of his hair a fierce comfort. This time I stand. This time I fight. Silas, watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable, but for a deep, affirming light in his eyes, merely nodded. His fight was now inextricably hers. The Shady Valley County Courthouse buzzed with a morbid, anticipatory energy. Beatrice Whitmore, a viper in expensive black silk, watched Clara with an icy, reptilian contempt. Percy Langston, leaning on a polished, silver-headed cane, offered a smirk that didn't quite reach his cold, calculating eyes. The accusations spewed forth by Beatrice's high-priced lawyer were familiar and ugly, unfit, unstable, a promiscuous gold digger, now cohabiting with Silas Whitmore. Clara, poised and clear-eyed, took the stand. She presented her evidence, her journals detailing Charles's abuse, medical reports from the day of the eviction, glowing testimonials from Elliot's previous school teachers. If being a mother means refusing to run, standing up to bullies, and shielding your child from cruelty with every fiber of your being, then yes, I have done that, and I will continue to do so. Sarah Jenkins then took the stand. Her testimony calm and irrefutable, painting a picture of Clara as a kind, responsible young woman, before Charles Whitmore ever entered her life, systematically dismantling Beatrice's carefully constructed narrative of a conniving opportunist. Finn Morgan followed his presentation, sharp and incisive. He dismantled the Whitmore empire's facade piece by piece: Charles's documented reckless driving record, his numerous mistresses, the forged land contracts, defrauding Silas, Beatrice's attempts to manipulate Charles's will, and the suspicious circumstances around the suicide note. He then played the chilling recordings of Beatrice's threats to Clara. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Then the prosecution's supposed star witness, Maria Sanchez, was called. Pale but resolute, she walked slowly to the stand. Beatrice shot her a look of pure venom. But Maria, clutching her rosary, met Beatrice's gaze, then turned to the judge. She detailed Beatrice's explicit orders to destroy Charles's personal letters, particularly those to Clara, to change combinations on his private safe immediately after his death, and Percy Langston's subsequent explicit threats to silence her if she ever spoke. They wanted her gone. Mariah stated, her voice trembling, but firm tears tracing paths down her weathered cheeks. With nothing. Less than nothing. They wanted to erase her. Then the most shocking revelation, Maria testified, she had witnessed numerous clandestine meetings between Beatrice and Charles at the estate when Clara was away, meetings that felt far from maternal. She spoke of Beatrice's possessive fury when Charles had first announced his intention to marry Clara. This was the opening Finn Morgan needed. He presented his newly corroborated evidence, sworn affidavits from former staff at a discreet out-of-town hotel, confirming Charles and Beatrice had frequently met there over many years. Beatrice, it turned out, hadn't just been Charles's mother. She had been his occasional lover, a dark, twisted secret that now explained her pathological jealousy and hatred of Clara. Percy Langston had known and had used this knowledge to further entrench himself, manipulating both mother and son. Beatrice, exposed, let out a strangled gasp, her carefully constructed mask of grieving matriarch shattering into a million pieces. Silas Whitmore, a man of few words, but immense quiet presence, spoke next. He calmly detailed his substantial assets, establishing his capability to provide a stable, loving home. But I'm not here to talk about money. He stated, his resonant voice filling the courtroom, his gaze steady on Elliot, who sat between Mildred and Sarah. I'm here for Elliot, a boy who has started by his own choosing to call me Dad. He then dropped his own bombshell, confessing Charles's long-ago drunken admission of the land fraud. I was too lost in my own grief to act then. Silas stated, his voice thick with regret. A failure I will carry, but I won't fail another innocent child now. I won't fail Clara. He turned his steely gaze directly on Beatrice and Percy. They call Clara unfit. They are the thieves, the liars, the manipulators. They are the ones who ordered the attack on my ranch, endangering not only property, but the lives of my household. He then described in chilling detail the attempted abduction of Elliot and the recent arson, painting a clear, undeniable picture of their ruthlessness and desperation. Mildred McLean's heartfelt testimony, recounting Clara's quiet courage and Silas's slow return to life, added the final, unimpeachable touch of authenticity. The judge's verdict was swift and decisive. Clara Bennett retained sole legal custody of Elliot Bennett. Silas Whitmore was formally recognized as legal stepfather with a clear path to adoption should all parties consent. Furthermore, the judge ordered immediate criminal investigations into Percy Langston, Beatrice Whitmore, and any associated parties for conspiracy, fraud, attempted kidnapping, arson, and perjury. Beatrice, aghast, looking suddenly old and shrunken, saw her meticulously crafted empire of lies and control crumble into dust. Percy, his smug smirk finally wiped clean. His face ashen, was approached by federal agents who had been quietly observing and handcuffed on the spot. Clara swayed, not fainting, but exhaling years of accumulated torment, grief, and fear in one shuddering gasp. Silas was there in an instant, his strong hand steady on her arm, catching her. I did it, she whispered, a tearful, disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. I stood up. We stood up. You did, Clara, he affirmed, his voice rough with emotion, his eyes shining. Elliot, eluding Mildred's gentle hold, rushed to them, and they embraced. A mother, a son, and the man who had become their rock. A family forged in fire, now standing together in the clear, unwavering light of justice. The drive back to Sunrise Ranch, for that's what they were now definitively calling it, a beacon of new beginnings, was quiet, imbued with a profound, bone-deep peacefulness. That evening, as the setting sun painted the vast sky in hues of rose and gold, Silas handed Clara a glass of wine on the porch. To survival. he toasted softly, clinking his glass against hers. And to what comes after. Clara met his gaze, the fear that had been her constant companion for so long finally receding. I used to think love was a luxury. I couldn't afford something that only brought pain. Now I know. It's about finding someone who willingly sits with you in the dark until you're ready to see the light again, someone who helps you gather the broken pieces even when they have their own. Silas nodded, his gaze holding hers. This house, this land, it was empty, Clara, despite all I technically owned. Just a shell filled with ghosts. You and Elliot, you brought it back to life. I told Doc Avery I wasn't looking for this, didn't want it. Emily told me to find a good woman to take care of me. But I don't need a caretaker, Clara. I need someone real. Someone to share the quiet and the laughter. I'm still afraid of love. She confessed, her voice a vulnerable whisper. It's always felt like the place where the deepest hurts lie in wait. True love, real love, isn't about finding perfection, Clara. He said, his calloused hand gently covering hers where it rested on the porch railing. It's finding someone who sees all your cracks, all your scars, and doesn't walk away. Someone who recognizes those scars as proof you've lived, you've fought. She didn't pull away. She turned her hand, lacing her fingers through his. On the old weathered porch swing under a canopy of emerging stars, no grand declarations were made, only a shared, profound solace. You didn't save me, Silas, she whispered later, her head resting trustingly on his shoulder. You reminded me that I deserved to live to fight for that life. And you, Clara. He replied, his arm tightening around her. You and Elliot, you made me believe this old house needs laughter and new memories far more than it ever needed my solitary grief. Weeks later, under a sky the color of forget-me-nots, Silas took Clara and Elliot to the small, quiet hilltop cemetery where Emily and Annie lay, beneath a sprawling oak tree. He knelt, his hand resting on the cool granite of Emily's headstone. I found someone worthy, Emily. He choked out, his voice thick with emotion. Someone brave and kind and strong. You don't have to worry about me anymore. He turned to Clara, who stood a respectful distance away, Elliot holding her hand. Silas opened his palm. A simple new platinum band lay nestled within. The old ring, my wedding band. It stays with Emily. A promise I made for the days that were. This, he held out the new ring. This is for the days to come. If you're ready, Clara. Clara nodded, tears of a different kind now tracing paths down her cheeks. I'm ready, Silas. Not just to be loved, but to learn how to truly love again, without fear. She stepped forward, taking his free hand, and then turned to the headstones. I can never replace you, she said softly, her voice filled with respect. No one could. But I promise I will be there for him, for Silas. I will cherish him, and I'll protect Elliot with my life. I hope you're both at peace. Elliot squeezed her hand tightly. I'll take care of Dad too, Mom. He piped up with a child's earnest solemnity. He won't be lonely ever again, and Annie can be my sister in heaven. Their wedding was held in the newly flourishing garden at Sunrise Ranch, under a vibrant, hopeful spring sky. Ruby Mae Jenkins, Sarah's young daughter, whom Clara had befriended shyly, arranged wildflowers in mason jars. Mildred McLean, beaming, baked a magnificent tiered lemon cake. Finn Morgan, now a cherished friend, took photographs, his cynical journalist's facade entirely absent. Elliot, bursting with pride in a new suit, served as the unofficial, highly enthusiastic master of ceremonies. Reverend Elijah Burns, the gentle pastor from the town's small community church, officiated. Today, he said, his voice warm, You are not so much beginning a new journey as formally acknowledging the one your hearts have long understood you were already on together. One afternoon, some months later, a diminished wan Beatrice Whitmore appeared unannounced at the ranch gates. Silas met her there. I was wrong, she mumbled, avoiding his gaze, her once proud demeanor shattered. The jealousy, it was like a poison. It made me cruel. Charles, he was my son, but I suffocated him. I'm sorry. Vivian Whitmore also sent a halting dictated letter of apology. Clara, informed by Silas, merely nodded, not to forgive the unforgivable, but to finally fully release the last vestiges of bitterness that tethered her to their poisonous past. Percy Langston was eventually sentenced to 7 to 10 years in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. The town of Redemption Gulch watched his downfall in stunned, reflective silence. Elsie Tate, the town's elderly tailor, who had once coldly ignored Clara in her shop, brought a bolt of hand-embroidered linen to Sunrise Ranch. A silent, humble apology. Clara smiled, accepting the gift graciously. "I'm grateful for every kindness," she said. "I'm no longer defined by their past, but by the future we're building here." The community began to change. Inspired by Clara's resilience and Silas's quiet strength, a new sense of fellowship began to bloom. The town even organized a small fall festival to honor community heroes, with Clara and Silas as the surprised humble guests of honor. 2 years later, Sunrise Ranch thrived. Laughter, rich and genuine, was a constant echo. In a brightly renovated and expanded tool shed, the Sunrise Community School and Learning Hub opened its doors, with Clara having earned her teaching credentials online, patiently guiding children from marginalized families, children often overlooked by the system. Today, she'd say her eyes alight with passion. We're going to learn about the letters that form words, the words that form stories, and the stories that can change the world. And then we'll learn how to stand up tall after a fall, because everyone falls sometimes. Elliot, now a bright, confident 10-year-old, sat at a small desk, diligently penning a story for a statewide young authors competition, The Man Who Planted Grass, But Grew a Family. Silas walked in from the barn, cradling baby Grace, their daughter, her eyes a startling, captivating ash gray. A perfect, startling blend of Emily's gentle spirit and Clara's fierce, protective fire. "She's the bridge," Clara would often say softly, looking at her daughter, "the one who connects all our yesterdays with all our tomorrows." Ruby Mae Jenkins, thanks to a quiet scholarship fund Silas had established, was thriving in her first year at university, studying to become a veterinarian. One crisp, golden autumn morning, Silas stood watching Clara as she carefully hung a newly painted sign above the schoolhouse door. Its cheerful yellow letters proclaiming, "Knowledge is light." He bounced baby Grace gently in his arms. "Your mama," he murmured to the gurgling infant, "is the strongest, bravest woman I know. She faces down her fears every single day and still finds room in her heart to forgive and to build." Elliot burst out of the schoolhouse door, waving a sheaf of papers. "My story, I think I'm going to win. Dad, Mom helped me make it perfect." Clara and Silas embraced their exuberant son, then turned to each other, a look of profound, shared contentment passing between them. A family not just remade, but reborn. 10 years later. A letter arrives at Sunfield Farm, Wyoming, addressed to Mrs. Clara Bennett Whitmore. May 12th. Dearest Mom, the sunlight is streaming through the curtains here at our little farm, and the scent of Anna's famous waffles is in the air. It takes me right back to those early mornings at Sunrise Ranch, to a childhood I wouldn't trade for anything. My wife Anna is brewing coffee as I write this, and our little Emily Clara, your namesake, is already at the kitchen table seriously practicing her letters, just like you taught me. You showed me through everything that family isn't just about the blood in your veins. It's about where you're loved, right where you're seen, where you're safe to be yourself. I remember those dark days. They called you names. A burden, an opportunist, a homewrecker. But I also remember you holding me tight. Through sweltering days and feverish nights, your voice a fierce, protective whisper. I'm okay, as long as you're breathing, Elliot. I was too young to understand the depths of your quiet, unyielding strength, and the courage it took to choose kindness when the world offered you only cruelty. You always said, kind people don't need to scream to be heard, Elliot. Their actions speak volumes. At school in Redemption, Gulch, for a while I was that boy, the one with the troubled mother. But at home at Sunrise Ranch, you were just Mom. You mended shirts, cooked miracles from the garden, listened to my stories, and always reminded me. We may lack certain fancy things, Elliot, but we will never ever lack character or compassion. I'll never forget you selling your only remaining wedding gift, that battered old sewing machine, the one that belonged to your own mother, just to buy me my first real laptop for my writing. Don't write my life as a tragedy, baby. You told me when I protested. Write it as proof that choosing to love again, to build again, is always possible, no matter how deep the ashes. Last month at the first Whitmore Community School reunion, I stood up and read my first published essay. My mother was cast out onto a barren road, but from that dust she built a kinder world in return for all of us. Grace, now a spirited, fiercely intelligent 12-year-old with your eyes, and Dad's quiet resolve calls you her ultimate superhero. She's right, you know. You didn't just save me or Dad. You saved our world, and you helped build a new one for so many others. Once I was just a terrified, broken child left for dead on a roadside. Today I am a husband, a father, a man who can stand tall, his head held high, because you, Mom, taught me the enduring power of self-respect, the quiet revolution of kindness, and the unwavering courage to never ever be a victim of circumstance. Thank you, Mom. Not just for being my mother, but for being the incredible soul who proved against all odds that truth will always find its voice, and love will always find its way home. If anyone ever asks me who I aspire to be like, I'll simply say, a parent like mine. Your son, the one you saved in more ways than one, Elliot Bennett Whitmore. Elliot Bennett Whitmore, best-selling author, placed the letter gently beside a framed photograph of Clara, her face radiant backlit by the sun taken years ago at Sunrise Ranch. Outside his own farmhouse window, under a wide Wyoming sky, Clara, her hair now streaked with silver, knitted contentedly on the porch swing, Silas beside her, a steaming mug of tea in his hand, and their quiet companionship a testament to a love story written in resilience. Their home, like Sunrise Ranch before, it was a sanctuary built not of bricks and mortar alone, but of courage, kindness, and the enduring power of the human spirit to heal and to flourish. If you reading this resonate with this echo of unseen tears, of silent struggles, of battles fought in the quiet corners of your own heart, know that you are not alone. Perhaps you should share your story not just as Clara's tale has been shared, but as a reminder to yourself and to others, we have all in some way been a Clara. We have all faced our own barren roads. If your story is still untold, perhaps it's time to send it out into the world. You, with your hidden scars and your quiet strength, might just be the light someone else lost in their own darkness so desperately needs to see. You are not wrong. You are not invisible. You are not alone. You are seen.